Hello, friends. Yes, welcome back. It is I, Julian, aka the Cozy Representative. Happy New Year's, everybody. It's now 2021. I hope everyone's as safe and happy and healthy as they could be during these trying times as they still continue to be. But hello, what's up? What's happening? How's everybody doing? Nice to see y'all again. So, in my last video, I went over the mind-boggling, meteoric rise of 2008 neon pop-punk superstars known as Forever The Sickest Kids.
Open it up! Go crazy!
I followed them from their inception in early 2007 out of the Dallas, Texas pop-punk scene to basically blowing up overnight online with the release of their first song, Hey Britney, to signing to major label Universal Motown Records in just 4 or 5 months after forming. Pretty crazy. From there, they then dropped their monstrous, standout, amazing debut, Underdog Alma Mater, in April of 2008, which caused their hype basically to just skyrocket within the neon pop-punk Warped Tour scene at the time, causing FTSK to join their fellow neon flag wavers of the era, All Time Low and The Main and Mayday Parade, as all of those bands assumed their respective placements and positions as the biggest bands, practically household names within the late 2000s Warped Tour neon pop-punk wave at the time. The band Forever The Sickest Kids then reached what was probably, you could call their peak of popularity within the Warped Tour sphere in the summer of '09, and it became apparent that real, palpable mainstream success might have just been in the cards for the future of FTSK at that point. But, as I stated in my last video, not only at that point was the neon pop-punk wave pretty much on the brink of dying, unfortunately, but also the whole cultural landscape of the music industry as a whole is about to change, with the mainstream radio world shifting from, poppy rock bands to pretty much primarily four-on-the-floor pop music or rap music, or within a couple years from then, EDM. And Forever The Sickest Kids, a band who had shot themselves out of the hype canon by doing the 2008 neon trend so well, almost too well that it was almost to a fault, were about to face some of their biggest challenges as a band. I asked the question, could the most goofy-looking 2008 neon pop-punk band out of all of the goofy-looking 2008 neon pop-punk bands successfully evolve past the now dying neon image and join their peers like All Time Low or The Main and grow tastefully, adapting to the changes of culture and, set themselves up for a career of longevity? Or would FTSK fall from grace just as quickly as they blew up and end up with a fate similar to those neon pop-punk bands like, A Rocket to the Moon, or Every Avenue, or The Somerset, who just couldn't live down or grow past the whole neon trend thing? In my last video, we covered everything Forever The Sickest Kids did up until the Weekend Friday EP, which everything up until that point in their career I would definitely consider their rise. And today we will go over the rest of their career, which could be quantified as there was some falling going on. I'm not gonna say we'll get into it. I'm gonna go over what mistakes I think they made along their way and basically dissect their whole career trajectory as well as the music that came with it, what it represented at the time, what it means now, etc., etc. Hello. My name is Julian, aka the Cozy Representative, and this, my friends, is the rise and fall of Forever The Sickest Kids, Part 2, 2021, coming at ya. Let's go.
Since there are 6 different personalities in the band, was it hard kind of cultivating and making a sound, or are you guys all pretty much on the same page from the get-go?
I would say that's probably what makes it the most fun.
Yeah, definitely. It puts the kids in Forever The Sickest Kids. Yes. All 6 of us have different influences. All 6 of us have different influences. And when we get in the same room to write a song, all of our influences are shown through our music.
Songs for all the single ladies. Pulling down the boulevard, looking for a rebound. Diving into every bar, Main Street, downtown. Pop lines I'm thinking, shouldn't it be
place where we left off, I was talking about Forever the Sickest Kids' November 2009 release, an EP called The Weekend Friday. Just to recap, FTSK's original plan to follow up their 2008 breakout smash debut was to release one big project called The Weekend, which would be split up into 3 separate EPs. The first one called Friday, the second one being called Saturday, and the third one being Sunday. You get it, as a whole, it's The Weekend. Doesn't really mean anything, but I guess that, you know, a fun way to release 3 EPs, right?
So what was it like working on the new album Friday?
It was actually really quick. We got in and recorded in like a month, and like I said, we really didn't have much time at home to write, so it was just kind of like every day we work, but we kind of knew that when we took on the 3 album series, we knew we were going to be, you know, so busy for like a year and a half of writing and recording.
And the idea was that FTSK would be constantly releasing new music in small pieces throughout the next year and a half or so, and fans would get a higher quantity of music instead of waiting 2 whole years just for the next full length or whatever. In my last video, I described how, well, this seems like a really good plan on paper, and like in theory, this plan had a lot of holes in it that I don't think FTSK saw from the beginning. And it wasn't really off to a great start with the release of the first EP, Friday. For one thing, FTSK seemed to forget about the quality over quantity aspect of releasing music, because although fans did get new FTSK music rather quickly after the release of their first record with the Friday EP, the songs on Friday, while they were good songs, decent enough tracks, this EP as a whole just seemed a bit rushed and wasn't nearly as hard-hitting or as impactful or even as successful as their debut full-length Underdog Alma Mater. Which then begs the question, would 3 separate EPs really actually be a better idea than focusing all their effort on one kick-ass second full-length? The fact that the Weekend Friday EP wasn't quite as impactful as their previous releases shows to me that it might have been a better idea for them to take the songs that they had on that were going to be on Friday, spend a little bit more time on them, flesh them out a bit more, add some more songs, add a little bit more urgency and innovation, just like their first full length, make the fans wait a little bit, make the fans wonder, where's Forever the Sickest Kids at? I'm really fiending some new Forever the Sickest Kids music. And then, you know, spend time and energy into putting out a more impactful second full length in around 2010 or so, with a much better chance at creating another release with just as much buzz and hype as their first record, and kind of keep things fresh and exciting for FTSK and breathe some new life in the band. Like I said, quality over quantity is important. Sometimes scarcity and holding back from releasing things too quickly, whether it be in music or even, you know, YouTube world or anything like that, it can be good for creating hype within the fan base and also end up with a final product that doesn't feel half-baked. But more on all of that in just a second. While FTSK were in the process of releasing The Weekend Friday, the band was, like I said, still in the midst of the peak of their overall popularity as a band within the Warped Tour world, and kind of the mainstream world a little bit. They were part of some pretty big and high-profile tour packages from the latter half of 2009 throughout the beginning half of 2010. For example, after their stint on the Vans Warped Tour in the summer of 2009, FTSK then spent the fall of 2009 embarking on a headlining tour, pretty sweet, called the Cheap Date Tour, which I believe was sponsored by Taco Bell, which is funny, with opening acts and fellow neon pop-punk flag wavers on the bill, such as The Rocket Summer, Sing It Loud, My Favorite Highway, and, you know, FTSK's friends and hometown buddies, Artist vs. Poet, opening up the bill. Pretty cool tour package. I love Sing It Loud. Very underrated band. I should make a video about them one day. After some UK tour dates in the March of 2010 alongside We the Kings and You Me at 6, few other great bands, the kids, Forever the Sickest Kids, as it were, headed out on the gigantic high-profile Bamboozle Roadshow, the second Bamboozle Roadshow in a row, and I also believe the second one that FTSK had been a part of. They had been a part of the first one a year earlier in 2009, but this one was the second one in the spring and early summer of 2010, which was basically just a big traveling mini festival of sorts, kind of seems similar to Warped Tour, I guess, headlined by All Time Low, Boys Like Girls, LMFAO, and Third Eye Blind. Holy shit, it's kind of not like Warped Tour because LMFAO and Third Eye Blind definitely wouldn't be going on Warped Tour in 2010. Also, Good Charlotte and Hanson were also on the bill, plus an onslaught of other opening acts, as you can see, a ton of them, which included Forever the Sickest Kids. Pretty cool.
She's a backseat driver, a drama provider, an infinity of the world. She's a first-class liar, I trust and forget her. She's attractive but bitter.
Right around the time of the 2010 Bamboozle Roadshow, right before they went out on that tour, they put out a video on their YouTube page where they announced that they were officially in the studio in the spring of 2010 working on the writing and recording process for their next release, the next EP in the Weekend series, The Weekend Saturday. It was being worked on.
First question comes from Vicky Supporta. Vicky asks.
Hey, Vicky.
Vicky Dignon?
She asks, when is Saturday coming out? Saturday will be coming out at the end of the summer or the beginning of next school year, so be on the lookout for that.
Nice, kid. Great job.
Now, around this time, a brand new FTSK demo, which the band had been working on, called Get Over Yourself, had leaked onto the internet. It was a song they had been working on for the Weekend Saturday EP. Now, I actually totally freaking love this song. It definitely has that classic FTSK vibe, if you ask me. It probably has one of the most classic-sounding, infectious FTSK chorus melodies that I've heard in a while, but it also shows the band evolving a little bit into more of a refined sound, which was kind of cool to hear at the time. Also, this song is just a tad darker and maybe a little bit more rock than anything they had put out on the Weekend Friday EP. Still catchy, but a little bit just darker in tone. And I would compare this song's vibes to one of their more classic tracks like maybe Breakdown or Catastrophe. It kind of reminds me of the vibes in those songs. And it was nice to hear the slightly darker, more dramatic side of FTSK for the first time really since the Underdog era. I remember hearing this song back in 2010 and thinking, wow, FTSK are really back in the groove. Like, this song's awesome. The Saturday EP is gonna be awesome. It was cool. I was excited. Now, after the 2010 Bamboozle Roadshow, as well as FTSK's time spent in the studio that spring, the band then embarked on yet another headlining tour, which was called the Summer Camp for the Dope Awesome Kids Tour. At the end of summer of 2010, with opening acts such as The Ready Set, The Scene Aesthetic, Phone Calls from Home, and A Curse of Memory, another cool lineup. Come fall of 2010, right around the time when The Weekend Saturday was soon slated for release, FTSK released a new single which was entitled Keep On Bringing Me Down, which was announced as being the lead single off of the Saturday EP.
Why does the world, 'cause I know it, keep on bringing me down to my place to fight it, but it keeps on bringing me. And no matter how hard did I try to climb, I'll be pulled back down again. Oh, why does the world, 'cause I know it, keeps on bringing me down.
Now, this song, man, I'm telling you, what a song. This is a good FTSK song. Although this is like almost the definitive point where I would say Forever the Sickest Kids were officially no longer in their classic era, so to speak, I do have to say that kind of like the last song that I was talking about, Get Over Yourself, Keep On Bringing Me Down is an amazingly strong track and definitely the best song FTSK had released in quite a while, if you ask me. It is a very dark track, and much like the leaked track, Get Over Yourself, it has that classic FTSK flavor, but it also pushes the band in a newer, more refined direction. You know, everything was a little bit more consolidated than the songs on Underdog Alma Mater. It was a little bit more, you know, their sound was a little bit more reeled in this time around and a little less spastic, a little less of the Saturday morning cartoon core energy like I was talking about. And not to mention, Keep On Bringing Me Down, while anthemic and driving and very urgent, it is a very dark song, one of the darkest songs FTSK has ever released, really, throughout their whole discography, with lyrics about depression taking over your life, to the point where you haven't left your apartment in days and you've stopped doing the things you normally love and have fun doing, like playing guitar and whatnot, as you cry out to the world, why does the world as I know it keep on bringing me down? It's, you know, a lot darker than the songs that FTSK are normally known for, which was cool. It was like truly, honestly, the deepest and most real Forever the Sickest Kids had gotten on a track lyrically in years and also maybe ever. And the dark driving instrumental, which was also very energetic, complements the vocals perfectly. This is definitely a mosh track, I think, and this song is miles above anything that they put out on Friday, honestly, if you ask me. It's probably one of my favorite Forever the Sickest Kids songs in general. So this new EP rollout, this next phase of FTSK, for fans like me at the time, I was very stoked. So, while FTSK did just drop a really strong single, which left, like I said, 14-year-old kids like me at the time and other die-hard FTSK fans very stoked for the band's upcoming release, it would be foolish for me not to mention that in the grand scheme of things, of like the music scene and the greater aspect of the Warped Tour world as a whole, at the time, the hype for FTSK and their relevance had decreased significantly once 2010 had rolled around, right? Wasn't that quick? They blew up in like 2008, 2 years before. They were still a really big name in the scene, don't get me wrong, like they were still getting on big tours and like had a lot of fans and hype and whatnot, but like I said, the neon pop punk wave was dying at this time. I would say 2010 was like its final hurrah, before it was replaced by the metalcore wave with bands like Attack Attack and Of Mice and Men, and Asking Alexandria, and We Came as Romans coming in, and that type of stuff had become the biggest, most hype music in the Warped Tour world, and all of these bands had, you know, emphasis on chugging, really heavy breakdowns, screaming, you know, metalcore bands. It was a lot different. They looked like neon pop punk bands, but they played like this really down-tuned, you know, kind of cheesy metalcore. Sorry for calling it cheesy. I love a lot of that stuff. I'm just poking fun. You know, some call it risecore, some call it crabcore. It was huge, and once 2010 had rolled around, it had officially and successfully pushed neon pop punk, well, this isn't pushing, pushed neon pop punk out of the way and became the biggest craze on the Warped Tour. It was the flavor of the week at the time.
Everybody in this entire room, get the fuck off your feet!
Also, not to mention, you know, and this really sucked for FTSK, the neon wave was dying even within the world of pop punk. By 2010, bands like The Wonder Years and Man Overboard were starting to gain more steam, and this new wave of pop punk, which was kind of like aesthetically these more bro-ier, kind of hardcore looking dudes, you know, dudes with like buzz cuts and like snapbacks and gym shorts, you know, which were both what the bands looked like and the fans of those bands. You know, all those bands like The Story so far started rising and whatnot. Back in the day, I used to call it bro pop punk. I know Finn McKenty now has kind of dubbed it sad boy pop punk, but I used to call it bro pop punk because all of the, you know, all the bands looked super bro-y. They like looked like hardcore bands, and all of a sudden it wasn't like, you know, a bunch of like 14-year-old girls or whatever who were into the music. It was more like, it was like pop punk for those girls' boyfriends to get into, because, you know, people think with their eyes, and with bands like The Maine and All Time Low, you know, everyone's all distracted by the aesthetic. You know, people labeled those like girl bands or whatever because they had, you know, nice straightened hair and skinny jeans or whatever. But then you had, you know, the Wonder Years started coming in, and it was like, oh, it's like these are like dude pop punk bands. I don't know. That's just like the way I saw it in this weird thing. I mean, there were plenty of girls who were into the Wonder Years and plenty of guys who were into Forever the Sickest Kids. And, you know, I'm sorry to make it sound like such a gendered thing, but that's genuinely what it felt like at the time. Anyway, but either way you look at it, that new era of pop punk, you know, spearheaded by the Wonder Years and the story so far and all that, it was like that was grunge coming in, and it was killing the neon wave, which let's say was 80s hair metal. You know, it came in and just all of a sudden it was corny to be neon. So FTSK were in a rough place all around. All of a sudden they weren't like cool anymore. They were, you know, they were so rooted in the 2008 neon wave and such a, you know, monument of a band for the representation of the 2008 neon wave that by as early as 2010 they already started to seem kind of outdated and like yesterday's news, and started to be viewed as kind of irrelevant or even, like I was saying, uncool in the scene as these newer trends began rolling in. Unfortunately, that's just the, you know, it's how things roll. I mean, FTSK were at this time still on a major label, Universal Motown, but they still hadn't had like a big mainstream crossover hit, so they basically just still only existed in the Warped Tour world, which they were also becoming increasingly irrelevant in. So it was like, where were Forever the Sickest Kids going to go now? Where in the world does that band exist now? Were they going to be able to evolve enough to exist and be a big name in the Warped Tour world still? Despite their monstrous rise to fame in 2008, it was now looking like the odds were pretty stacked against them in terms of where they were going to fit now that neon was kind of over. Could a band like that evolve and have longevity? Well, keep watching and let's find out. I think you probably know the answer, though. Yeah, anyways, let's move on. So, the next chain of events that happened in the FTSK story is an interesting one. So, right after the release of their new single, Keep On Bringing Me Down, FTSK announced this onto their Tumblr page in the fall of 2010. Let's take a look, shall we? So, they said, new album coming out March 1st of 2011. Go tell the world. You have no idea how excited we are to release this self-titled album to you guys. We have screamed, yelled, sweat, danced, laughed, and punched pinball machines, as well as had many band bonfires, to decide the direction we want our band to sprint towards. We went into the studio with David Bendeth to record 5 songs for our next release of The Weekend Saturday, but whilst we were in the process of pre-production and tracking, our band came to an all-inclusive decision that we wanted to record 5 to 6 more songs and go all out and create another full-length album. Many nights are spent by us crowding around our speakers in the back lounge of our bus, listening to our new, bouncy, yet heavy, heartfelt, and meaningful songs that were written by us from our heart, that has real relevance in our lives and what we as a band go through in our lives as a touring band. We could not be any more ecstatic for our new self-titled full-length album to be blaring in your car stereo, singing you to sleep, and hopefully being the soundtrack of your year, if not life. Winky face. Yeah, you are the reason. This album is not the soundtrack of anyone's life. That's a spoiler, but we're gonna get more into that in a second. Yeah, sorry, Forever the Sickest Kids. You are the reason we are a band, and each one of you we love deeply. Thank you all for the love and support over the past 4 years. Woohoo, you're Forever the Sickest Kids. Alright, so there you have it. FTSK apparently felt so strongly about their new material that they decided to scrap the rest of the Weekend series idea and just go full throttle with another full-length album. That's awesome. It's like they time traveled into the future, watched this video, and then went back to try to change the space-time continuum and not, you know, release those 3 EPs. Because, like I was saying, remember how I was saying? There's holes in the plan. Quantity over quality over quantity, guys. In all seriousness, though, it does seem like the members of FTSK's eyes opened to, the potential flaws in releasing 3 EPs as opposed to 1 full-length, and in fact, singer Jonathan Cook opened up more about the band's decision to release a full-length instead in this interview with the Dallas Observer just a few months later. I wanted to ask about The Weekend Friday, actually. What happened there? It was an EP of sorts, and the plan was to release 3 of them all along, but now we have this record. It was supposed to be 3 5-song EPs, and then we put out the first one and had 5 songs, and then added a 6th song, and then added a 7th song, so we were just like, man, this will take forever if we put out 3 of them. 21 songs is a lot more than 15, obviously. The initial idea kind of changed, and also we realized the difference in perception between an EP and a full-length album. The EP was only selling certain amounts when we wanted it to do what a full-length album would, okay? Hey. So that was another reason that we said, whoa, let's rethink this. So when we were working on The Weekend Saturday, we realized that the songs were better than anything we'd done before and decided to release it as a full-length album, mostly so that these songs would get the attention they deserve. So we demoed out another certain number of songs, and pretty sure we had 11 songs that we were passionate about, and we just went ahead with the full-length album. So does that mean that the Weekend series is scrapped? Maybe. We might have a Saturday or a Sunday down the line, who knows. Alright, so see, there you go. FTSK realized all these potential flaws in the plan and changed course and, redirected their course. You know what I'm saying. In all seriousness, though, for real, besides them being so stoked on their new music that they wanted to make it a full length instead and make it this big statement as opposed to an EP, it seems the band also discovered the things that I've been saying about the Weekend EPs in this video, one very important one being that EPs are just, especially at the time, more specifically, did not make nearly as much of an impact as a full-length album would amongst the kids in the scene. Unless you're like Seosin releasing the Translating the Name back in 03 or something, then it's kind of a different, unique story, but I'm telling you, The Weekend Friday is far from Translating the Name. So, although EPs and artists pumping out singles and shorter releases more frequently is a lot more common nowadays, so in some ways FTSK were a bit ahead of the curve on their 3 EPs idea. They were almost a little too ahead of their time, because in 2010 or whatever, it was just simply unrealistic for 3 Forever The Sickest Kids EPs to each individually sell as well and be as impactful and as successful as full-length records. That just wasn't going to happen. I think that's what they thought was going to happen, but it didn't, and it wasn't. So FTSK at this point in late 2010 decided to change course and make a second full-length slated for March of 2011. Awesome. Except, however, this presents a new set of problems. And maybe this is just my personal OCD kicking in, but now, because of this Weekend Friday thing that happened, FTSK's discography is now super awkward and kind of bumpy and not very smooth because they just have this one random EP called The Weekend Friday with no follow-up to it. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, if you were a fan following them at the time, you know the story behind this EP and why there was no continuation of the Weekend series because you were following them in real time as they did it, and it made sense at the time. But if you're just getting into them now, or if you simply just aren't that deep into FTSK lore and you don't read interviews or whatever, it's just this one random EP strangely called The Weekend Friday with no explanation, just part 1 of an unfinished EP series. I guess that's really, it's not a problem that they released an EP, it's a problem that it's an unfinished series with no follow-up, which to me just sticks out like a sore thumb. I don't know, maybe it's probably my OCD that is all that is. It might just be a me problem. And although I've been going on and on about all the flaws of a 3 EP series, which I do stand by for where they were at the time, and I am glad that the band eventually did realize it too and changed course, but for my OCD's sake, I wish they had either just sucked it up and finished the Weekend series so that it would be a completed thing, or that they had just never started the Weekend series in the first place and just released a strong second record in like 2010 or so. But whatever, it's literally not a big deal. Enough about that. Hindsight is 2020, and all in all, the band was trying their best. Sometimes plans go awry, things change. It's all good. That's life. It is what it is. You know, sometimes you put out the Weekend Friday, doesn't go as planned. Whatever. It happens to all of us, you know? That's a common problem in people's lives. Oh, what'd you do last fall? Oh, it wasn't so great. I put out the Weekend Friday, and it just didn't. I have to change course. I gotta put out another full length now to, get more impact. I don't know. Trying to use that as like a metaphor or something. I don't know. That was a joke in my head, but maybe I don't know. I drink water out of a Tropicana bottle. I'm not drinking Patron. People have thought this is Patron, a really long Patron bottle, but no, it's just water and an orange juice thing. I like to do it. Less trips to the kitchen to get water. Okay, Jesus. Anyway, back on track. So either way, this now brings me to the release of the official second Forever the Sickest Kids full-length record, which was self-titled Forever the Sickest Kids, and was released on March 1st of 2011 through Universal Motown Records.
You're the life of the party, party, the life of the party, party, the life of the party. She's the best I've ever seen, turning heads, the pages in the magazine. She's so fun, she's so fun, I don't even know why.
So for those curious, half of the songs were produced by big-time producer David Bendeth, those songs being Keep On Bringing Me Down, Crossroads, Good Life, Bipolar Baby, and Summer Song. These, to my knowledge, were the songs that were originally intended to be on The Weekend Saturday. The rest of the songs were recorded by an assortment of big-name pop producers such as Shep Goodman or The Singles Club. Okay, now, this record. Now, like I've said many, many times already, I love Forever the Sickest Kids, I really do, but boy, do I have some criticisms about this record. Let's get into it. First of all, remember how I was saying that due to budding new musical trends taking over the Warped Tour sphere, that FTSK's hype and relevancy was starting to die out by 2010? Well, although, yes, I can say it again, although they were still technically a big, well-known name in the scene, by the time 2011 and their self-titled record had rolled around, their hype and relevancy had waned even more. Unlike the hype cannon explosion that 2008's underdog Alma Mater was shot out of, the release of the self-titled record was less of a huge bang and a lot more of a small thud. It almost wouldn't have even made a difference had they released The Weekend Saturday instead of this album, unfortunately. But before I get into my criticisms of this album, I will start out with the positives. There are, like, a handful of songs on this record that I do think are great, that I do think are awesome. Like I said, the record opens with Keep On Bringing Me Down, which, like I was saying, is probably one of my favorite FTSK tracks overall. They definitely started out the record on a high note. The song Crossroads, which is track 2, is like total classic Forever the Sickest Kids sounding. A super catchy track, an obvious choice for a single, and this song, more so than any song on this record, definitely harkens back to the sound and style of underdog Alma Mater. I've also enjoyed other tracks on this record. Bipolar Baby is a catchy and fun song. I've always enjoyed Robots and Aliens for its heartfelt lyrics and catchy melodies as well. There are definitely highlights on this album. There are high points. However, while there are a handful of decent tracks on this record, like the ones I just mentioned, the highs of this record are good, not great, and don't make up for the lows on this record. All of the other songs on this record, like Life of the Party, or King for a Day, or Good Life, Same Dumb Excuse, even Summer Song, which I'm going to get into that one in just a second. Most of this album is, I'm really sorry, Forever the Sickest Kids, if you're watching this, but in my opinion, are the most corny, watered down, like Radio Disney sounding bland music this band has ever put out. This is by far my least favorite FTSK release. It is what it is. Gone are the urgent, powerful, innovative, and unique attention-grabbing, fresh, dope awesomeness of the music that we experienced on Underdog Alma Mater. Most of the self-titled record feels uninspired, unoriginal, and ultimately just falls flat for me as a whole. It is what it is. That sort of special aspect, that unique creativity that they had back in the day is just non-existent on this record, and it is a huge bummer. For example, a song like Summer Song, while it technically is a good song, like, it's nicely written, you know? It's not like a bad song, but it's bland, and it's insincere sounding in the sense that it sounds like it could have been released by, like, any neon pop punk band. It sounds like it was written by songwriters, you know. I don't know if that song particularly was, but it sounds like it was written by, you know, major label songwriters, and it could have been, you know, it's a decent song, but it could have been by any band. It could have been by the Somerset, you know, it could have been by, like, Every Avenue, you know, but it's just like they could have been by Mayday Parade, but they gave it to Forever the Sickest Kids. It's like, that unique, original aspect of their music is just not there. And whenever that happens to a band, you know, bands like that whole major label, this album just sounds like a bland major label album, that always sounds to me like a band on its last legs in its dying days. And there are plenty of bands like The Maine, for example, who have recovered from that, but a lot of times bands don't. And it's unfortunate to hear a record like this coming from a band that, although they have been signed to a major label since they basically formed, they were onto some really creative and different stuff early in their career. So it's like, man, guys, I know that you are capable of better than this, you know? Like, yes, there are good songs on this record, but you are totally capable of so much more. It's just, you know, what I've always felt about this self-titled Forever the Sickest Kids album. Yes, this record is fun, it's catchy, I don't hate it as a whole. The band were still quite skilled at crafting pop melodies, and I do love pop music. There's nothing wrong with pop music, but the fact of the matter is FTSK simply dropped a bland and uninspired record which paled in comparison to the strength of their old tunes. And I guess FTSK felt like this record was their best material yet. I don't know, that is something that they said, but in my eyes, the band was failing to update their sound and style to be as relevant as they used to be in the Warped Tour scene. Nothing about this record is, you know, remotely like anything at all that was like still relevant for Warped Tour by 2011. And not only that, yes, you could say that they were on a major label, but they made a record that was way too bland to have any sort of real mainstream success, especially now in a mainstream world where rock bands weren't getting on the radio or MTV anyway. It's a shame, really, and it only adds to these very fundamental mistakes that I keep mentioning that I believe FTSK made along the way, especially at this point in time, which caused their hype to dry out around this point and resulted in them ultimately not having a very long career, but we'll get to that in a second. All in all, instead of sticking to their guns and releasing a strong second full-length record in around 2010 or so, which obviously I think that they should have done, and I think they were more than capable of doing despite the neon wave kind of dying out, if you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, you know, of the whole grand scheme of their career, let's look at it this way. FTSK followed up their insanely good, insanely hype first full-length with an awkward, somewhat out-of-place, kind of rushed EP in 2009, and followed that up with a kind of watered-down, bland second record 2 years after that in 2011. At this point, FTSK had officially failed to properly follow up Underdog Alma Mater and were unfortunately bitten by the all-too-familiar sophomore slump bug. There you have it. You gotta give it to them, though. They were trying their best. They, you know, neither the Weekend Friday or the self-titled record are either that bad. You know, I'm not trashing these releases. I still love FTSK, and the self-titled and Friday are like, you know, they're important to me because FTSK are a band that I love, and there are songs on those that I like. But in hindsight, I think both of these releases were missteps in the grand scheme of things and caused the future of FTSK to look very dim once 2011 had rolled around. Now, all across the board, this album got pretty mixed reviews from from critics and fans alike. However, it did chart a number 33 on the Billboard Top 200, so that's something. Now, as far as touring on this album goes, in early 2011, the band went out on a tour opening for Good Charlotte, with the band This Century also on the bill. Pretty cool. Directly following this, the band then spent the spring of 2011 on the Spring Break Your Heart tour, I like that name, a jam-packed bill, which FTSK had actually headlined, with openers Breathe Carolina, This Century, We Are the In Crowd, and Before Their Eyes. Now, around this time, FTSK actually did play a very high-energy and hype set, a very well-attended set at the 2011 Bamboozle Festival around springtime, to a really huge and energetic crowd, which was really cool to see FTSK getting some real palpable love from the scene in the metalcore-dominated year of 2011. You know what I'm saying? The band then immediately, that summer, went into the Zoomies Couch Tour, rocking alongside Ann Arbor before rolling into a fall tour, opening up for Simple Plan on the Get Your Heart On tour with fellow openers The Cab and Mariana's Trench. So as you can see, there's kind of a shift between them touring with bands like We the Kings and Never Shout Never all the time to them touring with, like, kind of bands who had been in the game for a while and were kind of like pre-Neon, like Good Charlotte and Simple Plan. And interestingly enough, I actually saw them on that tour when they were opening for Simple Plan with The Cab in 2011, and it was a good time, it was a good show, but I can tell you that FTSK's hype at that gig compared to a couple years earlier was not nearly as exciting, and the new songs that they were playing off the new record did not go over as well live as songs like She's a Lady or Believe Me I'm Lying, at least from what I can remember, because that was almost like 10 years ago now, which is crazy, but yeah, I saw them during that era. Pretty interesting. I don't know. So, during the era of the self-titled album, there was yet another roadblock in the band's career, another pitfall that the band had to find a way to overcome. Now, although all 6 original members of FTSK were present and participatory for the recording process of their 2011 self-titled record, keyboardist Kent Garrison left the band on positive terms with the other members right before the release of the self-titled record, and guitarist Mark Stewart also left the band on positive terms as well towards the end of 2011, in the sort of the middle of the touring cycle for the self-titled, leaving FTSK as now a consolidated 4-piece, Jonathan on vocals, Caleb on guitar, Austin on bass, and Kyle on drums. The first thing that the band did after being reduced to a 4-piece lineup was release a bumpin' new single in January of 2012, a new song, something nice to ring in the new year. The single in question is the song entitled Shut the Front Door, and in parentheses, Too Young for This, which is a pretty epic pop rock song leaning more in the anthemic rock side of things. Kind of like I was saying, kind of a little bit more in the vein of bands like Good Charlotte or Simple Plan, who they were touring with at the time. I don't think that Shut the Front Door is like the greatest song ever. It's definitely one of my least favorite Forever the Sickest Kids songs in like the grand scheme of things. It's down there with most of the self-titled record. But I will say it is at least an improvement from a lot of the bland material on the self-titled record. It feels more urgent and original and creative. There's a lot more life in it, and it has a little bit more of kind of an organic vibe, sort of in the vein of FTSK's earlier, more raw material and away from the, kind of stale sound of the self-titled. Sorry I'm hating on the self-titled so much. I really don't hate that album that much. It's just, I don't know. You can listen to it and decide for yourself. You know what I'm saying? You'll probably know what I'm talking about if if you've heard the record, but the song Shut the Front Door, albeit a pretty corny song, was a step in the right direction, and looking back was, I think, maybe a little bit ahead of the curve on certain things too. The song does sound a lot like something that, I don't know, a band like 5 Seconds of Summer would have dropped on like their second album. That She's Kinda Hot Though song that 5 Seconds of Summer have, this Forever the Sickest Kids song, Shut the Front Door, kind of sounds like a precursor to what 5 Seconds of Summer ended up doing with their sound. Although I could be wrong. I haven't listened to Five Sauce that extensively, but it kind of sounds like that kind of vibe, but like an earlier version, which is cool. Also, probably my favorite thing about this song, it has a literal, like, electronic-core synth breakdown at the end of it, which actually does go pretty hard and kind of reminds me a little bit of, like, one of Icy Star's breakdowns, but maybe a little bit more of a pop-punk version. Now, while this song as a whole is a little bit too far onto the corny side of things for me to go back and listen to it very often, it does, like I was saying, show a lot more originality and creativity than anything FTSK had brought to the table in a while, and definitely showed that FTSK were taking a step in a positive, evolved direction, which was cool to hear at the time. Now, despite kicking off the new year with the release of this new single, 2012 was, all things considered, a pretty quiet year for the boys in FTSK. The band's hype was pretty close to dead in the water at this point. Sorry to sound rude, but I mean, I was there. I was around in 2012. I remember. It was. I'm not lying. The band did not do a whole lot of touring that year, aside from scattered festival appearances, as well as a, believe it or not, short summer tour with Trey Cyrus's solo project at the time called Ashland High. And, okay, so at the tail end of 2012, FTSK frontman Jonathan Cook got involved in something that no member of FTSK had ever gotten themselves into before, which was, and this is the word of the day, say it with me now, controversy. This situation that I'm about to talk about is probably one of the strangest, and also, not to mention, my literal favorite scandal that any Warped Tour band member had ever gotten themselves involved in. I definitely did not see this one coming at the time, based on everything that I knew and kind of assumed about the guys in Forever the Sickest Kids and like who they were personally. It seemed kind of out of character. So at the time, this situation was reported by a lot of different online publications. At the tail end of 2012, it was probably the most press that FTSK had gotten in a while, which is pretty funny. I mean, do you think it's true that, there's no such thing as bad press? I don't know, but at the time, like I was saying, this was reported by all sorts of publications like Alt Press, punknews.org, mindequalsblown.net, Property of J.A.C.K, all the, scene music news sources at that time. But today, I will be quoting my reported facts on the situation from an article posted by the Dallas Observer. So let's check it out. So the article in question is titled, Rolex is not amused by Dallas pop punk singer's counterfeit watch business. Huh, alright. Let's read on. Their bio on Jambase chalks it up to a, quote, magical combination of talent, perseverance, and opportunity, but whatever their secret, Forever the Sickest Kids has enjoyed a remarkably long run in the music business. The Dallas-based pop-punk band managed to land a major label record deal months after its formation in 2006 and has since released a handful of decent-selling albums, they were on Warped Tour, but surviving 7 years in the music industry doesn't necessarily bring riches, and lead singer Jonathan Cook eventually turned to other means to support himself. Specifically, he started selling counterfeit Rolex watches on Craigslist. He admitted as much in a statement released last month, followed by his arrest. Oh god, I'm sorry that I'm laughing. It's not funny, but it's like, come on, it's kind of funny. Following his arrest by Dallas police for selling counterfeit goods. So this was his statement that he gave to fans of Forever the Sickest Kids regarding his arrest for selling fake watches. Quote, "Before being arrested, I was not aware of how serious such a transaction was, and through my experience, I have learned that it does not matter how or where I purchase the watches." Really? You didn't know that, Jonathan? Simply presenting an item for sale with a false trademark logo is a criminal offense, even if it is well known that the item is fake. I am now aware of the financial harm that the distribution of counterfeit property can cause to others, and that this activity is a very serious matter with serious consequences. As a result, I will no longer participate in nor support anyone that engages in this type of activity, no matter what the counterfeit item is. As a member of our band, Forever the Sickest Kids, it has been my desire to be a positive role model to our friends and fans. As a result of this experience, I would like this statement to be considered both informative and serve as a warning to other young people. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough, Jonathan. The article then states the following. The charges against Cook have since been dropped, but his public apology failed to mollify Rolex. The watchmaker hit Cook with a federal lawsuit yesterday accusing him of trademark infringement and counterfeiting. The lawsuit doesn't say how long Cook had been selling the watches, just that Rolex's investigative team first spotted Cook's Craigslist ad in late November and arranged to buy 15 of the watches in person. The Rolex investigators were accompanied by police who seized the watches Cook was carrying and found another 20 in his Burleson, Texas home. Cook's brief foray into the replica watch business could prove ridiculously costly. Rolex is demanding up to $2 million for each trademark. Ooh. That Cook has counterfeited and infringed. In other words, oh man, a judge could force Cook to pay Rolex $70 million in damages. Here's hoping that new album sells well. Oh god. I do not want to be in Jonathan Cook's shoes in this situation. So, obviously Jonathan Cook had gotten himself into some hot water with this one, and like I was saying, isn't this such a strange scenario for the singer of a Warped Tour pop punk band like Forever the Sickest Kids to get themselves involved in? I mean, this is just so random and out of the blue, right? It's so weird and like kind of sketchy to a point where it's almost funny to me. I mean, you can tell I've been laughing. I know it's for Jonathan, it's probably a personal, serious matter. But I mean, come on! It's kind of similar. It's like less on the Johnny Craig MacBook scandal side of things and more on like the Soulja Boy selling knockoff Apple watches like kind of thing. Remember that? It's like a situation like that. It's like, dude, really? I will say it does add this mysterious kind of sketchiness to Jonathan Cook as a human being, which I appreciate. And obviously, according to the article, apparently the charges were dropped. I have no idea what the details of this court case were or how the charges got to be dropped. Well, it's confusing because it says they were dropped, but then later they said a judge could make Jonathan pay like $70 million to Rolex. I don't know exactly. That's the thing about this whole situation, is that besides Jonathan's like public statement being like, I'm sorry, let this serve as a lesson to people, besides that, I've never heard Jonathan or any of the other FTSK members talk about the situation publicly. So I don't know if it was settled outside of court or if Jonathan got some really good, legal team behind him. I don't know what happened. So my apologies to Jonathan Cook and company if this is a sensitive or, personal topic, but it was a real thing that happened and it was reported in a bunch of articles at the time, and it would be a disservice to this video not to bring it up because it is, after all, part of the story of Forever the Sickest Kids. So there you go. And it's like kind of funny. Assuming Jonathan didn't have to pay like $70 million or whatever. But I mean, come on! Frontman of Forever the Sickest Kids selling fake Rolex watches. It's kind of, well, I don't know if it's badass, but it's like, I don't know, man. Sound off in the comments. What do you think of Jonathan Cook's fake Rolex watches business? I think it's an interesting little tidbit of, information. It was strange, kind of funny, pretty weird. That's what I think. And, oh my god. Okay, I have a theory that this Jonathan Cook Rolex counterfeit situation just might have had something to do with what ended up being, spoiler alert, the end of Forever the Sickest Kids' original run as a band, but more on that later. So anyway, right around the time of all of this Rolex scandal business, FTSK were actually gearing up to release a new third full-length record. So first of all, FTSK's major label that they had been on since the start of the band, Universal Motown, had actually shut down their operations in 2012. They ceased to exist, leaving FTSK without a label. And for this next record, FTSK actually ended up signing with Fearless Records, which in my opinion is a very good fit for the band, considering so many of FTSK's peers from the original neon pop punk scene that they came up in, like Every Avenue, The Main, The Morning Light, and Mayday Parade, were all at one point on Fearless. Fearless was a great neon label, you know, in like 08 and 09. So it made sense for FTSK, and it was a smart business decision considering Fearless Records was still very relevant in the Warped Tour scene in 2013, and arguably more relevant than ever at that point, with bands that were very poppin' around that time on their roster, like Bless the Fall, Chunk No Captain Chunk, Pierce the Veil, who were one of the biggest bands, The Word Alive, were all on their roster, just to name a few. All bands who were huge on Warped Tour at that time. So it was kind of like FTSK had a shot at really being relevant in the Warped Tour scene again. It was also the first time FTSK had ever been on an indie, non-major label in their whole career, which is pretty interesting. So it's like, oh, you know, it'll be cool to see maybe The Weekend Friday and the self-titled album, which I had described as missteps, maybe the major label were breathing down their necks their whole time and caused those releases to end up the way they did, you know? So at this time, for like a fan like me, it was like, oh, this will be awesome to see what FTSK can do, you know, independently without a major label. Maybe they would kind of return to their roots a little bit of what just the vibe of the band was back in the day when they were in college in 07, writing the songs that would end up on Underdog Alma Mater. And believe it or not, that is exactly what their next record ended up being. Let's get into it.
But I want to talk about your album that's coming out in June.
Oh no.
Shoot, crud. I knew this was going to come up in one of the interviews.
Sore subject?
Very sore.
Tell me why. What's happening? Why sore?
Well, part of it is it's not coming out till June 25th, and people already want to talk about it. So it's like...
But it's complete, correct?
Oh, it is
done.
complete.
Okay.
Yeah, it's over 12 songs.
It's also really, really sad because we love it so much, and then no one can hear it.
So you guys won't tell me anything about it?
No, we will.
We've got good news, and we've got even better news.
Okay, I'm going to start with the better news.
Well, here's the best news.
Okay.
The best news is this is our first record that we've done with the same producer from track 1 to track 12.
Mike Green.
It's going to be what we call, and this is the word of the day, cohesive. We've also signed with Fearless Records, and this will be our first album that's not on a major label. And the freedoms that come with that are quite unexpected.
Now that we don't have a major label breathing down our necks, excuse me, we felt that we could truly write the record we've been wanting to write for the last couple of years.
Mr. German.
Yeah,
Over here.
Yeah,
Back here.
How many songs are going to be on the record?
approximately 12, anywhere between 12 and 12.
Forever the Sickest Kids' third record, entitled J.A.C.K, J.A.C.K, an acronym which stands for, get this, Jonathan, Austin, Caleb, and Kyle, the 4 remaining members of FTSK, was released on June 24th of 2013 through Fearless Records.
Album title, I have a recommendation.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, we might actually go there.
Oh, shoot.
Okay, ready? Wait for it.
Hey,
Wait for
don't
I
make
put
it
a
a
lot of
joke.
thought into
Please
this.
don't make it a
I put a
joke.
lot of thought into
Don't
this.
make it a
If
joke.
it's a
'cause we need
joke,
help.
if it's a
Hey,
joke,
put a lot of thought into this. I need you to take me seriously for
We
2
might
seconds.
actually take it if it's
Ready?
good.
Ready? Right here. Jack. You know why?
wait, what?
Because it's all of your initials.
Jonathan?
What has happened?
Jonathan,
Wait,
you
what?
are
Wait, what?
sneaky.
No,
You
what do
sneaky.
you
Son of a gun.
What do you
You're
mean?
sneaky.
Listen,
Wait.
Listen
are
to
you-
me. Wait.
liars don't have friends and don't make friends and won't keep
110
friends.
You guys.
Nothing.
Did have
You
you?
guys.
Where did you get that
It's your
from?
initials. It's all of your
That is the
initials.
face of a liar.
Yes, leave the room. Give me the mic. Leave the room.
What just happened?
Has there been any
Was this scooped?
discussion?
Did you scoop this?
Nada.
Have you talked with anybody
No.
about?
Just turn the cameras off.
Can I
Turn
tell
the
you,
cameras
I
off.
really,
Did
you're
you-
making me feel
did
so
you
awkward
make that
about
up?
it. Yes.
What if we named it Jack
I
Crab?
am so confused.
So
Not
can we
insane.
talk about this? Could this be
I
it?
don't know if we can talk
Could
about
this
it.
possibly be the name of your album?
I'll tell you why this is funny.
Why?
This was suggested 2 days ago to the guys
By who?
a band member in this group. I said we could do so many things if we named our album Jack, and then it kind of wasn't well received by anyone.
Let me tell you something right
And-
now.
You take your sunglasses
And
off
then
for
you
this,
come
huh?
here and you
If
come
you're
up with that
lying-
idea.
Guys, this was meant to be.
All right,
just
let's tell you about the
blown
album.
away.
The album has a couple of pop songs. It has a stripped down song, and it has several rock songs similar to Underdog Alma Mater, our first album. We're thinking if we like to rock out to the songs, if we like to pop out to the songs, if we like to strip down to the songs,
Yes.
kids will like to do it
I
too.
like it.
To put it simply, this record was exactly what the band had been needing for a long time. A return to form album. This album to me feels like the true follow-up to Underdog Alma Mater, and this is the record they should have released back in 2010 as opposed to the Friday EP and the self-titled album. Anyway, this album is very focused, very cohesive, very driving, very urgent, much like their earlier material. It's a very solid pop rock record which pushes the boundaries of what is usually considered possible for a pop rock or a pop punk band. It colors outside the lines, so to speak, and it shows the band pushing the pop rock genre to new creative places the same way that they did it back on Underdog Alma Mater in 2008. For the most part, this album has some of the most original as well as experimental material the band had made to date, and it's ultimately a very strong record from front to back, if you ask me. It really does sound like the grown-up, truly evolved version of the FTSK we knew and loved back in 2008, and these songs are genuinely really great. I do want to emphasize that I definitely think this is an album that to this day is hella slept on. It didn't make a big splash, not a lot of people really got into it at the time, which we're gonna get into why in a second, but I gotta say, if you're a fan of pop punk or neon or Forever the Sickest Kids or bands affiliated with Forever the Sickest Kids, it might be worth your while to go back and check out the stuff that FTSK were doing on the J.A.C.K album, because you really might enjoy it. I had never gotten into this album until recently, like when making this video. And I'm not gonna lie, like this record, it takes kind of a few listens, but once you start getting into it, you're like, oh yeah, this is great. This is a great album. The song Nikki, which is actually FTSK's most popular song by far on Spotify, like numbers-wise, which is pretty interesting, is a great heartfelt single, which was co-written with the amazing Patrick Stump of Fall Out Boy, which is pretty cool. And this song's probably one of Forever the Sickest Kids' like best songs that they ever made in general. It's a great track. Keep Calm and Don't Let Me Go is a fun, energetic, and experimental pop rock track, which is the best example of a song that sounds like an updated, evolved version of Underdog era FTSK. It has that original spirit of the band. It brings back their Saturday morning cartoon core element, and it also has a section towards the end with some really cool synth and electronic experimentation, which really harkens back to the band's old material. This song is really cool. Another song in this vein of like pushing the boundaries of pop rock in a way only FTSK could is the song Ritalin, parentheses, Born in America, another impressive example of a really progressive, creative, and unique pop rock track. This song is super well crafted and interesting. It includes some really great lyrics. This is like probably the first time FTSK were putting real effort into making their lyrics stand out and be the main focus of the song. They've never really been known for like, you know, like amazing lyrics or anything. But this song is a real lyrical, you know, they get a bit meta even in the second verse of this song where they say the following. Check this out. Quote, "You're as fickle as you've ever been. You'll be gone just as soon as the trend ends, and I'll be playing in front of 10 drunk fans, God willing. We're never good enough no matter how hard we try. There's always a better band, better song, make up your mind. Do you love us for who we are or our skinny jeans and tattooed arms?" They're really like, it sounds like they're like you know, calling out the fan base a little bit, calling out the scene. Maybe they're a little frustrated with, you know, being not so much of a relevant band in the past few years, that they're like, you know, putting into their lyrics like really real life stuff that they were going through more so than ever before, which is really cool. This is throughout this whole record, not just on this song. There's a lot of like really cool lyrical gems on this thing that are just so cool to hear from a band like Forever the Sickest Kids, you know? Kick It and Playing with Fire are very straightforward pop punk tracks, a little bit reminiscent of, you know, All Time Low a little bit on both of these songs, but with some seriously infectious, amazing melodies. Both of these songs are so fun to listen to and just have some really great moments on them. Super catchy. There's a song on here called Count on Me for Nothing, which is a super wild song. This might be the most experimental song on the album, the most like Texan Forever the Sickest Kids ever got on a track. When you first press play on this song, it kind of sounds just like a regular sounding FTSK song at first, but once it hits the first chorus, it's off to the races with some totally hype craziness. It's kind of like, it's almost like a country western sounding pop punk song, if that makes sense. And it's totally awesome and totally doesn't actually suck, which is unbelievable that they pulled that off. It's very like anthemic of a song. This song is also kind of like the FTSK version of Ain't It Fun by Paramore a little bit, because there's this big, like, almost gospel part at the end. It's like this huge, you know, section with a literal church choir, like, gospel guest vocalist singing over it. It sounds pretty wild. It's really cool. Instead of the band resorting to and kind of settling for very simple paint-by-numbers pop like on the previous self-titled record that they did, FTSK on J.A.C.K once again display their ability to take influence from all sorts of genres, from pop punk to straight up rock to emo, and make it work in one cohesive package, and also, like I was saying, push the boundaries of all those genres while combining them. It's really cool. And they do it well on this record. And not to mention, FTSK are kind of heavier than they've ever been before on this album. It's not like a super heavy record as a whole by any means, on some like A Day to Remember type of stuff. They didn't go like full easycore, but there is way more double bass, like chugging action and poppy electronicore, easycore breakdown parts throughout this album than any album they've put out before, really. And it's awesome to hear them experiment with that more. I gotta mention Caleb Turman's super intricate guitar parts are super rippin' and awesome throughout this whole record. He really stepped up his guitar skills like never before on this record, because after all, this was the first one where he was the sole guitar player after Mark Stewart left, you know, about a year before. So Caleb Turman really stepped onto the plate. Great guitar work on this album. And like I was kind of hinting at, the band also returned to experimenting with synths and electronics in creative new ways. Yes, the self-titled record was very electronic and had synths on it, but not in ways that were all that unique. You know, on the self-titled, it was more paint by numbers, like I said, but on J.A.C.K, it brings back the electronic experimentation and innovation that they had brought to the table back on Underdog. And I know I keep comparing this record to Underdog Alma Mater, because that was, you know, it is kind of a return to form album, but I do have to also mention that this record isn't just Underdog Part 2 either. It's the kind of record that has hints of the Underdog flair here and there, and ultimately has a very similar feel of Forever the Sickest Kids' roots. It has the spirit of their old music, but it also shows the band successfully branching out into new, different, more evolved styles as well. As much as it is kind of a throwback to their old sound, it is very much a departure for the band and something new and different. They really accomplished a lot on this album. It's a really sick album. It really is. This record was really FTSK's best shot at becoming relevant in the scene again and breaking themselves free from the perception that they were just this outdated 2008 neon band that like your sister listened to when she was in 6th grade or whatever. This was their shot to either evolve away from neon, like what, you know, the Maine were doing at around that time, or at least evolve into a new, refined, updated version of neon, like, say, All Time Low were doing at that time. That was the problem with this record. While it is a great record musically, and might honestly have some of FTSK's most well-crafted music on it, it was released at a very weird time. Not only had the scene changed a lot, like I was mentioning before, by 2013, bands like Pierce the Veil and Sleeping with Sirens were now dominating the Warped Tour world. It was all post-hardcore and still metalcore, and the pop-punk thing was still in the Wonder Years, Man Overboard, Story So Far wave of bands. Forever the Sickest Kids' J.A.C.K album didn't really make sense in the context of the other music that was coming out at the time from other Warped Tour bands, you know what I mean? And one of the biggest problems about J.A.C.K in regards to where FTSK's career was at that point, regardless of how good that album was, it was just simply too little too late, you know what I mean? Literally, and I can say this because I was a huge scene kid who paid close attention to the scene throughout the duration of FTSK's entire career. By the time 2013 had rolled around, FTSK hadn't truly been relevant since like 2009. That's 4 years. In teenage Warped Tour time, that's like 10 years, you know what I mean? Yes, All Time Low were still relevant in 2013, but that's because they didn't really fall off. They had a little bit of a weird thing with Dirty Work. People didn't really like that album, but that album was still really big, and they immediately corrected course a year after. And as we look back in time, people actually love Dirty Work now, you know? So it's like, Forever the Sickest Kids kind of just vanished and came back with this record. It didn't really make sense enough, you know? I guess what I'm trying to say is FTSK were now stuck in the middle. And what I mean by that is all of the fans who had gotten into them back in 2008, when the fans were teenagers, were now all kind of grown-ups and college-aged around this time when J.A.C.K came out, and most of which had probably kind of grown out of their scene phase at that point and probably would have no interest in checking out a new FTSK album. They also had the potential of, you know, attracting a new, younger, more current fan base with this record, but like I said, this record just didn't make much of a huge splash when it came out, because it just didn't make sense with where the scene was at the time. Scene kids in 2013 would rather listen to like Citizen or La Dispute or something like that at that point rather than Forever the Sickest Kids, you know? It was also like just a couple years before the whole scene revival thing started coming into play. In 2013, the Warped Tour stuff in general was at a weird point and was kind of at its most irrelevant in terms of just the grand scheme of the whole music world, you know what I mean? People were like embarrassed that they were emo kids when they were younger. People were embarrassed that they were into like neon pop punk bands. It hadn't come around full circle like where it is now, where people were like embracing that time, you know what I mean? So that's why I keep saying it was a weird time for this record to come out, and I think that's kind of why it didn't make such a huge splash. Maybe, I don't know, it was just too little, too late, not really the right place or the right time, despite being a great record. And oddly enough, the band never really toured on this record either. Like I was saying, J.A.C.K came out in the summer of 2013, and the FTSK boys played the whole Warped Tour that year in support of the record, but that was it. After that, poof, they were gone. No fall tour, no winter tour, no word from the band, until March 17th of 2014, when Property of Zach posted a news article titled, quote, "Forever the Sickest Kids' future is cloudy with the chance of inactivity." Let's check out what this has to say. So here's a quote from an interview with Caleb Turman in March of 2014. "What's the status of Forever the Sickest Kids right now? Honestly, man, I'm going to be pretty forthcoming about this. I'm not entirely sure. I'm moving on. With that being said, I love those guys. I might even do a tour with them someday in the future. But with that being said, for a while now, I've been meaning to do my own music. I feel quite set free. I hope I'm not stepping on any toes. On a side note, Fearless Records is amazing. I love those guys so much. I hope everyone has a lot of success in that realm." Interesting. Kind of cryptic, kind of mysterious, but not out of the question, you know what I mean? Not sure what's going on, but it's not looking too good in terms of Forever the Sickest Kids still being a band, am I right? And going back to what I was talking about earlier with Jonathan's Rolex situation, I know that the article said that the charges had apparently been dropped, but I've always theorized that maybe, and I don't know for sure, I don't want to put things out there that aren't true, this is just me theorizing, but maybe the Rolex situation had something to do with the mysterious, out-of-the-blue end of Forever the Sickest Kids right after dropping, like, a new record, which was a return-to-form record. I mean, if you look at it, Right after Forever the Sickest Kids' 2013 Warped Tour run, Jonathan Cook actually got right into selling real estate and started selling like $1 million mansions in Texas, which is pretty insane. I listened to a podcast interview with him, and he's apparently like, he's like a top dog in the real estate Texas game. He's like broken all these records, and he sells all these beautiful like $1 million mansions. It's crazy, which, you know, good for him, but it has me thinking that maybe there was still some large sum of money that Jonathan had to pay off to Rolex, and maybe it was the type of situation where any money that was, you know, being made through FTSK would legally have to go right to Rolex, and FTSK definitely wasn't super lucrative at that point anyway, so maybe Jonathan was like, yo, I gotta go sell some mansions back in Texas so I don't end up in prison or whatever, or in like millions of dollars worth of debt. I don't know. Like I said, I have no idea if that's the case. I'm not trying to say that like it's true, but I mean, it kind of sounds like it could be, because they broke up very mysteriously. They didn't really ever put out an official statement, and they also never really put out any official statement on the Rolex situation besides Jonathan's, like, apology, and they just kind of vanished, you know? So unless there was some other stuff going on, I mean, the dudes were, you know, kind of approaching age 30 at that point. Maybe some of them just wanted to settle down, who knows? Maybe the band just wasn't making them happy anymore, but I got a feeling, you know, being sued by Rolex for several $1 million, you know, doesn't happen to everybody, and I don't think that there's ever really an easy way out of that. So regardless of what happened, that was it. FTSK's last shows were on the 2013 Warped Tour. Maybe the J.A.C.K album would have been a bigger record and would have been more appreciated had they done more touring on that record and really promoted it more, but unfortunately to this day it's always been this kind of slept-on album, and I had never really even listened to it until recently, like I said, and I was kind of blown away. I had always never really given it the time of day, but listening to it now, I'm like, man, they did a really good record. Like, if I was in Forever the Sickest Kids, I think J.A.C.K would be my favorite record. Like, if I was part of making that album, I think I would be most proud of that one. But obviously, as a fan, you know, the fan favorite is kind of always usually Underdog Alma Mater, because that was kind of just the classic record, you know? And Forever the Sickest Kids are kind of back. They have played like a handful of reunion shows. I think the first one was in 2017, and then they did a couple dates on the Sad Summer Fest in the summer of 2019. I've heard that they are working on new music, and they were supposed to get some new stuff out, but obviously the pandemic happened, which kind of, you know, put those plans awry. But if you follow them on social media, apparently new stuff is in the works, and which would be awesome to hear. I mean, Jonathan Cook does not look like a pop-punk frontman at all anymore, but it would be interesting to hear, you know, what new Forever the Sickest Kids music in 2021 would sound like. So anyway, without taking up more of your time, thank you for watching this little video series that I made on the rise and fall and the history of Forever the Sickest Kids. I hope it was enjoyable for you, and yeah, give Underdog Alma Mater a spin, give J.A.C.K a spin. Forever the Sickest Kids are a great band, and I think overall, like I've said throughout this entire series, underappreciated, an interesting story. I would love to sit down with a member of that band one day and like, you know, get the full scoop on what exactly went down. But for now, this was the story of Forever the Sickest Kids. It's been the Cozy Representative. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a lovely night. I love y'all. Peace out. Stay safe. Keep it real. Love you guys. Bye.